Adam Smith sat at his sleek, modern desk, looking out of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. The city sprawled beneath him, a labyrinth of buildings and lights. Everything was in place. He had climbed the ladder, secured the promotions, and earned the respect of his colleagues. His life on paper was exactly what it was supposed to be: successful, secure, and enviable. Yet something gnawed at him, a quiet, insistent feeling that no amount of success or status could fill. He glanced at his phone and saw the text from Christy. "How's your day going, love?" The message was simple, sweet, and characteristic of the woman he had married. Christy, his wife, his partner of 8 years, the woman who had stood by him, supported him, and built a life together. She was everything he had ever wanted in a partner: loving, intelligent, caring. But there was a growing distance between them, a distance he couldn't quite put into words. At first, it had been the little things: the long hours at work, the missed calls, the evenings spent in separate rooms. Adam told himself it was nothing, just the normal ebb and flow of life. But over time, those little things added up. Christy, who had once been the heart of their home, had become quieter. She had retreated into her work, diving deeper into the projects she managed at her firm, and Adam had, unwittingly, let her. He hadn't noticed the way the space between them widened. He hadn't seen the toll it was taking on her. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was an odd sense of discontent, a discomfort he couldn't place. He had everything a man could want: a beautiful wife, a thriving career, a beautiful home, the picture-perfect life. Yet the more he achieved, the more something inside him stirred. The thrill of the chase, the excitement, the validation, was no longer enough. And that emptiness, that gnawing feeling, had led him down a dangerous path. It wasn't something he had planned or intended, but Adam had started cheating. He wasn't proud of it, but it was happening. With Laura, then Sarah, and even a few fleeting encounters with women he met on business trips, each affair offered a temporary escape, a break from the routine, a reprieve from the unspoken tension that had started to suffocate him at home. He didn't tell himself that he was unhappy in his marriage, at least not at first. He told himself Christy wasn't emotionally available anymore. She had become consumed by her work. They had grown apart. But it wasn't his fault. At least that's what he convinced himself. Each affair felt like a quick fix to the emptiness, a fleeting relief from the isolation he felt in his own marriage. Christy, on the other hand, had no idea. Or at least that's what Adam believed. She hadn't said anything, and when they did talk, it was always about the superficial things: her work, his job, their future plans. But the spark between them had died long ago, hadn't it? Christy, always wrapped up in her career, seemed distant, detached. Adam had stopped seeing the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But Christy had always been astute. She was the type of woman who could read the smallest signs. She noticed the late nights, the unexplained absences, and, more than anything, she noticed Adam's growing emotional distance. She noticed the way he no longer looked at her the same way. But instead of confronting him, instead of starting a fight that would only break her heart, she chose to observe. She didn't let the hurt show. She simply stepped back, as if preparing herself for the inevitable. What Adam didn't realize was that Christy had been quietly preparing herself for a future without him. She had seen the signs long before Adam had made his first reckless decision: the affairs, the excuses, the lies. Christy had always been a woman who understood the quiet power of patience. She had really tried to hold on to their marriage. She had balanced her career and their relationship as best as she could. But as the distance between them grew, so did the realization that Adam wasn't the man he used to be. And maybe, just maybe, he never would be again. Instead of lashing out or confronting him, Christy chose a different path. She began saving money. She made calls to her financial advisor, setting up accounts in her name, preparing for the worst. She wasn't giving up on their marriage yet, but she was preparing for the inevitable. She knew that if Adam's infidelity ever came to light, it would tear them apart. She had to be ready, for herself, for her future. Adam continued with his lies, believing that his affairs were just harmless distractions. He told himself that Christy's growing distance was a result of her long hours at work, her exhaustion. She wasn't interested in their marriage anymore, he thought. She had checked out. He had told himself that he was justified in his actions because, in his mind, Christy had stopped caring. She wasn't giving him the excitement he needed, so he sought it elsewhere. The truth, however, was far more painful than Adam could understand. Christy wasn't emotionally distant because she didn't care. She was emotionally distant because she knew. She had known for months, maybe even years, that Adam was slipping away and she wasn't going to chase him. Instead, she would quietly prepare herself for the moment when he would break her heart. But Christy wasn't going to be the one left broken. For Adam, things began to feel off. The growing distance between him and Christy was noticeable, but he refused to acknowledge it. He kept justifying his actions, telling himself that the marriage had run its course, that Christy was no longer the woman he had fallen in love with. He told himself that his emotional detachment wasn't his fault. And yet the tension lingered, heavy, oppressive, as if the storm clouds were already gathering, ready to burst. But Christy wasn't blind. She wasn't ignoring the signs, the subtle changes in Adam's behavior. She saw the late nights, the phone calls, the excuses. She saw how his eyes no longer lingered on her with the same affection they once did. And she saw him, the man she had married, begin to slip away piece by piece. Christy knew the truth. She wasn't confronting him because she no longer needed to. She was preparing. And the more Adam pulled away, the more determined she became. The storm was coming, and Adam had no idea just how close it was. Christy had already started making her moves, silently and methodically, while he continued to believe he was the one in control. The tension built slowly until it became undeniable. Adam thought he was the one making decisions in their marriage, but Christy was already several steps ahead, and when the storm hit, it would be nothing like he expected. Adam sat in the driver's seat of his car, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. The divorce papers sat on the passenger seat, the edges sharp and crisp, as if mocking him. He had signed them that morning after a sleepless night of wrestling with his emotions. The decision was made. Christy had emotionally checked out of their marriage, or so he believed. For months they had drifted apart, and now it was time to make it official. He was done, and he was ready to walk away. He couldn't deny that the past few months had been rough. His affairs had become more frequent. The lies had piled up. Each affair had felt like a temporary escape from the tension that hung in their marriage. Adam had convinced himself that Christy wasn't emotionally available for him anymore. She had grown cold and distant. She was always busy, always working, and Adam told himself that it wasn't his fault. He was justified in seeking comfort elsewhere. Christy hadn't been the woman he married, so why should he be the one to carry the weight of their fading connection? In Adam's mind, this divorce wasn't about an unhappy marriage. It was about the inevitable end of something that had already died. He had tried, at least that's what he told himself, but he knew it was more than just work or responsibilities that had made Christy distant. It was his actions, his betrayal, and his emotional detachment that had put distance between them. Christy had done everything to keep their marriage together, but Adam had stopped trying a long time ago. He had fallen into the comfort of affairs, justifying it with the notion that Christy didn't care enough to fight for their relationship. The last time they had tried to talk about their marriage, Adam had made excuses. Christy had quietly listened, but she had said nothing. She hadn't begged him to stay or cried for him to change. And in that silence, Adam had seen nothing but indifference. He assumed Christy had already checked out of their marriage. She had no fight left in her. In his mind, this divorce was just the logical next step. There was no point in dragging it out. Adam pulled into the driveway, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, a wave of unease washed over him. He dismissed it. He was ready. He had made his decision, and he was confident it was the right one. But as he stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door, something felt wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, Christy would be in the kitchen by now, preparing dinner, or at least she would have left her purse by the door, her shoes scattered on the floor. But there was nothing. The house felt empty, lifeless. He called out her name as he stepped inside, but there was no response. The silence pressed in on him. His footsteps echoed through the hall as he moved toward the kitchen. It was cold and dark, void of the usual hum of Christy's presence. The faint smell of her morning coffee lingered, but it didn't feel like she had been there recently. Adam's mind raced. He checked the bedroom. The bed was made, her side empty. He moved to the closet. Her clothes were gone, her shoes, her toiletries, everything. It was as though Christy had disappeared without a trace. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of a confrontation, just an eerie emptiness that settled in the pit of his stomach. His breath caught as his eyes fell on the dining table. A single sheet of paper rested in the center. His heart skipped a beat. He moved toward it slowly, unsure of what to expect. Maybe it was a note from Christy, explaining herself, trying to salvage the last shred of their marriage. But as he unfolded the paper, the weight of her words crushed him. It was a New Year's resolution, written in Christy's neat handwriting. Adam's stomach twisted as he read the first line. Number 1, accept the fact that I married a liar. The words struck him like a slap in the face. His mind reeled. Christy had known. She had always known about his affairs. How could he have been so blind? How could he have thought he could keep lying to her? Number 2, secure my future, because you were never going to. The weight of those words settled in his chest like a stone. Christy had given everything for their marriage, and she had been left with nothing. She had always been the one holding things together, carrying the weight of their life, while he sought escape in the arms of other women. She had done everything to keep them afloat, but Adam had pushed her to the brink. Number 3, I'm taking back what's mine. My life, my future. I've already ensured I won't be left with nothing. I'm moving on, Adam. I'm taking care of myself. Christy had already started rebuilding her life. She had planned for this moment. Long before Adam had even considered the possibility of losing her, she had ensured her financial security, her independence, and Adam had no idea until now. Number 5, as for your career, you've already ruined that. I've made sure your company knows the truth. You're being let go. I don't need to explain anymore. You've already made your choices. Adam's vision blurred as he read that line. Christy had called his boss. She had used her connections, her influence to ensure he would lose his job. She had known how to protect herself, how to ensure she would be okay, even after he had done his worst. Her final words stung more than anything he had read. It wasn't just the end of their marriage. Christy wasn't asking for reconciliation. She wasn't begging him to stay. She had already let go. She had already moved on. The finality in her words was overwhelming. Adam stood there paralyzed by disbelief. He could hardly breathe, his mind spinning as he tried to make sense of what he had just read. Christy had been preparing for this day, for the moment when he would betray her one last time, and now she was gone. There was nothing left for him to hold on to. No second chances, no excuses, no redemption. He felt his legs give out beneath him, and he sank to the floor, his hands shaking as he stared at the paper. The house felt colder than ever, the silence more suffocating. He had lost her, for good. And it wasn't just the marriage he had lost everything. His self-respect, his career, and the woman who had once been the center of his life. For the first time, Adam understood the full weight of his mistakes. Christy had taken control of her future, because she had to. Adam's hands trembled as he stared at the paper. It was still there, the New Year's resolution that had shattered everything. His mind was spinning, struggling to piece together the enormity of what had just happened. He thought he had been in control. Hell, he thought he was the one who had the upper hand all along. But now, as he stood in the cold emptiness of their once shared home, the weight of his own mistakes was coming down on him like a tidal wave. It was a force he hadn't expected, one that knocked the breath out of him, and the shame he felt was so deep, it was suffocating. His thoughts raced. How had this happened so quickly? He had been so sure of himself, so convinced that he had made the right decision to walk away from the marriage. Christy had checked out, hadn't she? She had distanced herself, emotionally withdrawn. He had justified everything, his late nights at work, the affairs. But now, looking at the cold, stark reality before him, Adam realized how wrong he had been. Christy hadn't checked out. Christy had seen the end of their marriage long before he did. She had known about his infidelities. Of course she had. How could she not? The signs were so obvious, the lies so thin. But instead of confronting him, instead of demanding answers or starting a war, she had quietly begun to take control of her life. She had made her peace with the fact that their marriage was over long before Adam ever did. And while he was wrapped up in his own selfishness, thinking he could play games and have it all, Christy had been preparing for the inevitable day when his lies would catch up with him. Adam's stomach churned. The truth hit him like a slap in the face, and it felt like the floor beneath him was giving way. He had betrayed her, not just once, but repeatedly. The woman he had promised to love, cherish, and honor had seen through his facade. She hadn't fought for their marriage because she knew it was already dead. And now, as he stood there in the hollow, empty house, Adam was left to face the consequences of his betrayal. His legs gave out beneath him, and he sank to the floor, his head in his hands. The shame was unbearable. He had taken her for granted, treated her as if she were the one who had been neglecting the relationship. But it wasn't Christy who had been emotionally absent. It was him. He had been the one seeking validation outside the marriage, the one who had been unfaithful, the one who had emotionally abandoned her. And now, as the reality of it all sank in, Adam realized just how deeply he had wounded her. And it was too late. The house, once a symbol of everything they had built together, now felt like a tomb. Empty, hollow, lifeless. And Adam had no idea how to bring it back to life. He had no idea how to fix what he had broken. The realization that Christy had already moved on, long before he had even considered the possibility, was more than he could bear. She had taken control, but she had done it silently, without fanfare or outbursts. She had reclaimed her power and her future, while Adam had been too self-absorbed to see it happening. As Adam sat there, his mind swirling, the silence of the house pressed down on him. The pain of his mistakes was unbearable. But it was the realization that Christy had been so much stronger than he had ever given her credit for that hurt the most. She had been the steady force in their marriage, even when he had failed her time and time again. And now she was gone. Completely gone. The phone buzzed in his pocket. Adam's heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Christy. He stared at the screen, his hands trembling as he unlocked his phone. The message was short, almost too brief, but it stung like a knife. "You never mattered enough to fight for, Adam. I gave you everything. I just waited for you to ruin it." Adam felt the air leave his lungs. Christy's words were sharp, direct, and final. There was no pleading, no anger, just a cold, unflinching truth. She had given him everything, and he had thrown it all away. And now, in her final message, she had made it clear there was no turning back. She had moved on, and Adam was left to drown in the wreckage of his own decisions. The text stung more than any argument, more than any confrontation could have. Christy had emotionally detached from him, and he could feel it in every word. She was gone. There was no longer any fight left in her. She had already fought her battle, and she had won. Adam's phone slipped from his hand, falling to the floor with a dull thud. He stared at the empty space around him, the silence so deafening that it felt like his ears were ringing. He had nothing left. Christy had taken everything she needed, her emotional independence, her financial security, and now her peace of mind. What was left for him? He sat there lost, broken, and completely powerless. He had no control over this. Christy had taken charge, had taken control of her own future, and now there was nothing Adam could do to fix it. He had waited too long, had been too selfish, and now the consequences were staring him in the face. The power dynamics had shifted. It wasn't just a divorce. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. This was Adam's complete unraveling. He was no longer the one making decisions. Christy had made hers, and she had taken everything with her. For the first time in his life, Adam felt truly powerless. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, seemed meaningless in the face of the truth. He had never truly understood Christy, never understood her strength, her intelligence, her resilience. He had always thought she would just accept his mistakes, forgive him, and keep going. But she hadn't. She had outgrown him. She had moved on while he had been too blinded by his own ego to see it. And now, as he sat alone in the empty house, Adam realized the cost of his selfishness. Christy had been the stronger one all along. She had seen through his lies, and now she had taken everything. Her life, her dignity, her power. And Adam was left with nothing but the weight of his own mistakes, a broken man in the ruins of what was once his life. Adam stared at his phone, fingers trembling as he held it in his hands. The screen was blank, but his mind was buzzing with thoughts. Thoughts of Christy. The silence between them had stretched for days now, each passing hour adding to the unbearable weight in his chest. He had tried to reach out to her, texts, calls, emails, but they all went unanswered. Christy had closed herself off completely, and Adam knew deep down that the woman he had loved was now gone, emotionally, physically, and most certainly forever. His thumb hovered over her contact in his phone. It was almost laughable. He had never felt more powerless than in this moment, desperately trying to get a hold of someone who had already made up her mind. His fingers slid over the screen, typing and deleting his words over and over. "I'm sorry. Please, we can fix this. I need to talk." They all seemed empty now, meaningless. He didn't know where to start, what to say, how to fix something that had been broken beyond repair. The house around him felt colder with each passing second. The silence, once comforting in the early days of their marriage, now felt like a suffocating void. The furniture they had chosen together, the photos of their happy moments, the quiet spaces they had once shared. Everything felt like a reminder of how far they had fallen. He was in a house that wasn't even his anymore. Christy had taken that from him too. She had moved on, and Adam was left to stew in his own regret. As he sat in the living room, the hours dragged by, the house only getting quieter. He couldn't escape the feeling that everything he had built was slipping through his fingers, turning to dust. Adam tried again, another text, another call, but no response. It was as if Christy had vanished entirely, leaving him with nothing but the cold remnants of their marriage. He had no one left to turn to, no friends to call, no family to seek solace from. The only person who mattered was gone, and Adam knew, deep down, that he was the one who had driven her away. The distance between them was now absolute, and with it came the crushing realization that there was no going back. Hours passed. He paced through the empty rooms, the cold air making everything feel even more isolating. He had been too blind to see how far things had fallen, too caught up in his own selfishness to notice Christy quietly pulling away from him, emotionally preparing for a life without him. And now he was left alone to face the consequences of his actions. The words echoed in his mind as he sank to the floor, his head in his hands. It was over. Christy was gone. He had lost everything. His career, his marriage, his pride. All of it was gone, shattered beyond repair. For the first time, Adam understood what it truly meant to be powerless. Christy had always been stronger than he gave her credit for. She had known how to survive, how to adapt, how to move on. And now Adam was left with nothing but the remains of his choices. The house was empty, his life was empty, and he realized with gut-wrenching clarity that he was the one who had destroyed everything he once held dear.